way that we experience time is very illusionary. And so the space-time construct that we experience is an illusion, because at a more fundamental level, it's not how the universe is operating. Fundamental level, there is no time. So our experience of a linear sequence of time with a unidirectional linear sequence of time is illusionary. But as Albert Einstein geniusly, brilliantly said, time is an illusion, but a very persistent one. But then also space, the idea of separation between objects is very illusionary.
Yes. Yeah.
That our perception is limited by what we can see, and so what we can see is restricted to this tiny little narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. If you could get to a high enough frequency, especially like approaching the Planck frequency, which is about the highest frequency for our particular domain, you would not see independent objects at all. The particles that comprise your body are connected via little vortices to particles that comprise the material of other objects.
How do you show someone how space is creating, or the vacuum is creating the black hole, and where, and how does space-time emerge from that? I'm coming from the position that everything we can do, everything we create technology to do, we can do with our own minds. So energy extraction from the vacuum fluctuation using high frequency plasma resonance. So showing all these examples, but he said what you need to do is like kind of create this spark. I got so excited when I saw this, because that when you go, like when I spent years going into the heart, right, going deep within the heart, eventually what I started to notice is that I started to feel this like energy start coming up. When I would place my attention there, it would just like rise up.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I'm glad we finally were able to connect here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I so appreciate you doing this. So anytime that it's convenient for you, I'm perfectly happy with. Today is actually my birthday, and this is like the best present for me.
Oh, wow. Oh, fantastic. Well, happy solar return on your revolution around
Thank
our
you.
central star. Yeah.
Thank you. So how was your trip?
Oh, it was really fantastic. It was a epic journey, even though it was seems like it was very brief. It was just a little over a week, but it was just so great to get to see our new location, see the new operation, the new laboratories. The location, I could, now that I've seen it in person, I can see that it was chosen very deliberately.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting. Because of it's like a vortex, or the energy there?
There is the energy there, which is very centering, which is somewhat different from our initial location in Kauai, Hawaii.
Oh,
which was actually a very volatile type energy.
Interesting.
You can kind of see it even in the geodynamics of the two regions. So this region in France is one of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. The region in Kauai, Hawaii is one of the youngest. So there's a lot of dynamic, almost like volatile type energy in Kauai, Hawaii, which is great for doing transformative type work. But so in the location in France, it's right next to Mont Blanc, which is the tallest peak in Western Europe.
Oh,
So very interesting geological region.
yeah.
The
Wow.
geodynamics in that region are very interesting.
Hmm.
And then as well, it is a very a location that's very conducive to the international connectivity.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like an international hub in that location, which I think is going to greatly facilitate some of our objectives that we have with, the International Space Federation.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. How interesting.
Mhm.
What's interesting too about what you just said is Bashar says that Hawaii is the heart chakra of,
Mhm.
of the planet.
Oh, no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to compare it. I was making the comparison in my head. What I thought was interesting was I was making the comparison in my head that because you said there's like this, the bubbling up energy, and so I was making the comparison. I was thinking of the spiritual heart, which is different than the heart chakra, right? So the heart chakra is in a different order of reality than the spiritual heart. The spiritual heart, I equate to the vacuum. But to me, when I feel the spiritual heart, it's a constant like bubbling of energy. It feels like the vacuum to me, because I know that that's what I'm feeling. It feels so like those images that you guys have of what the vacuum looks like. That's how it feels to me. It's a constant like it feels like a swelling of energy.
Well, certainly, it's one of the primary conduits or channels through which we're receiving energy through the vacuum.
Yeah.
So I could very well see how you would equate it with like a bubbling type
Yeah.
of energy. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's definitely one of our primary nexus points for connectivity with energy exchanges via the vacuum information structure. So
Is our heart, the spiritual heart. Yeah. So do you know it as the spiritual heart too? And you know it as different than this heart chakra?
I don't know actually if I have a clear distinction between the two. Actually, I can see what you're saying there. Yeah, I guess I just equate the energy from the heart chakra as like spiritual heart energy. So
I experience them as different. Yeah.
As different.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
experience the spiritual heart deeper. It feels like it's a different level of reality. It feels like I believe the spiritual heart is the vacuum. And then the heart chakra is a layer in, so it's not as deep. So I would say the vacuum is the container of everything. So I would say our consciousness is really the container. Us as existence itself is the container. And that I don't believe has any energy in it. And then when we become self-aware, that's when the energy of the vacuum is created. Okay. So that would be, that's the reflective medium, the vacuum. And then born out of that, or born within that, is then the physical body and the energetic body of the chakra system. So the chakra system is not as physical as the physical body, obviously, but it's different than the vacuum and different than the spiritual heart. So the heart chakra to me feels more towards the surface of the skin, whereas the spiritual heart feels very deep, back down, like back towards the spine, and then slightly right of center, or just maybe so they feel different to me. And this is something I couldn't feel before, right? Like this took practice of me like really going in to be able to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, it kind of sounds to me like you're what you're referring to with the spiritual heart is accessing like within the heart itself, which the heart chakra isn't located in the same position as the heart. For one thing, like you said, it is closer to the surface of the skin.
Surface. Yeah.
Technically, in some of the diagrams I've seen and what I've felt myself is the chakras kind of form a tube through the body, so you can actually feel it on your back as well in the same location. But I definitely have experienced that as distinct from accessing the space of the heart, the singularity space inside the heart. So I do see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that singularity is the spiritual heart. Right. But I don't think that's the only place it is. I feel like that it's everywhere, but for some reason it's very strong there. And what was fascinating is when I watched the Nature of Reality workshop, and Nassim put up the image of I wonder if I have it on my desktop somewhere, of the spark being created in order to tap the energy of the vacuum. You create a spark, right? You spark it. You try to. Let me show you that image. Do you know what I'm talking about? What I'm referring to?
I don't know.
Here
I remember that part of the video, that presentation. I was doing a lot of work behind the scenes, so actually I missed some of it.
Okay, so this. Right, energy extraction from the vacuum fluctuation using high frequency plasma resonance. So showing all these examples, but he said what you need to do is like kind of create this spark, right? And what's interesting is I got so excited when I saw this, because that when you go, like when I spent years going into the heart, right, going deep within the heart, eventually, so all I used to feel there when I would go there is just peace. Like it just feels like empty space there, right? And I didn't feel much other than empty space feels like peace. Okay. But eventually, what I started to notice is that I started to feel this like energy start coming up. When I would place my attention there, it would just like rise up. And it's like the spark, and spiritual texts talk about this. And they call that the Christ consciousness. They call that the monad, or the Christ consciousness. And if you look at some pictures, like pictures of Jesus, he's got a heart there with a flame in it. So I thought that was really interesting when you put this up there, because what happens with that energy when I feel it, I can direct it wherever I want within the physical body. And it truly feels like life force energy, like I'm healing different parts of my body so what I do is I hold the spiritual heart in my awareness at the same time I'm holding a body part that I want to heal. And that you can feel the energy flowing. I'm not directing it, but I can direct it, but I'm just feeling the energy. I'm holding those 2 points in my awareness, and the energy flows. The higher always transforms the lower. So I feel that energy like flow into that other part of my body. And I also can just like feel it radiate like the sun. And it's like I can turn up the volume of the sun, and I just feel this energy just expand, expand, expand. But I thought that was so fascinating, because it is like he said, you have to create the spark, like you're like almost like igniting it. And that's what that feels like when you do it with your heart.
It's an interesting consideration, because since those same dynamics that may be in play for coupling to the quantum vacuum structure and harnessing the energy from the 0-point energy density, because those dynamics are similar to what is occurring in our own system, in our own bodies, and it's related to our consciousness. And this is something that you won't ever hear Nassim say or speculate on, but there's a possibility that 0-point energy harnessing device may as well also be a conduit for a sublime type intelligence, a very peaceful, sublime form of very non-local type consciousness. So, that's going to be an interesting potential ancillary property of this technology.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's fascinating because, I'm coming from the position that everything we can do, everything we create technology to do, we can do with our own minds.
mm,
And in fact, everything we're doing with technology, yeah, I mean, it is things that we can do with our own minds, but we're creating something what seems to be out there to do it, right? But we can actually do it with our own consciousness, and I think that's what we're heading towards. and along the same lines of what you said, it's just like a new level of intelligence. One of the famous Tesla quotes, right? If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy. What is it? Energy, vibration, and resonance. Is that what he says?
Frequency,
vibration, and resonance.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And another level of that is the who we know ourselves as, or what we feel. So what we feel is determined by what we believe, right? Or what we're focusing on, or what we're believing in any given moment, right? And then that creates a vibration, right? That creates a feeling. And then that feeling determines what we have access to, right? The information we have access to. So like when you're really angry, you're in a different vibration than when you're really peaceful, right? And therefore, when you're really angry, you can only think angry thoughts. You only have access to anger information, basically. And so when we create this coupling to the field, which is pure intelligence, right? Wisdom, then you have access to all this other different information. And I feel like we're, that one of the spiritual books that I'm reading right now. Do you know who Paul Selig is?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
So Paul Selig is a channel. He's channeling a consciousness, a group of beings and they call themselves the guides, or if they want a name, it's called Melchizedek. So there's like 12 texts, I think. Really, really interesting information. This last book that was just released, I think it's the 12th in the series. They talk about now we're entering, like if you've been reading these books, because they're energy transmissions and they give you like certain attunements. And it says that as we're entering a new level of vibration where the old is just, basically history, what we've known ourselves as, is from a different strata of vibration, right? Of reality. And this new world that we're entering, we have no idea what it's going to be like, but it's going to be one where we really understand who we are and what this reality is, and I think you guys are contributing tons to that, because when the science is there, then no one can argue, right? No one can argue. But they do say, and Bashar also says this, which is really interesting, that it's going to take about 4 generations for this to really take hold. They said that it's going to be about 3 generations before humanity really understands, like starts to realize this, like when the majority of humanity will really realize this, but then the fourth generation to really commence, right? To be really sealed in. So we'll really understand the nature of reality, and that we are in the mind of God, and that we are individuated God, individuated consciousness, where we are God having its own unique experience, and live from that. And there will be no more wars, and we'll have free energy, and it'll be really different than our human minds can even understand.
Given the kind of transition that's going to be, 3 or 4 generations is a relatively short period of time for the amount of transformation that's going to take place.
Yeah. Well, one thing that they point out, which I find really fascinating too, it's like when you light a candle in a dark room, right? The light just shines on everything, right? So their point is that you don't have to convince anybody. You don't have to, but if you just be it, right? If you just stand as awareness and stand as knowing, understanding what this reality is, just your presence alone, you are that light, and you will illuminate the others if they're in their, and because space-time is an illusion, we don't need to go anywhere to illuminate others. We just need to be it ourselves, and then that will raise the consciousness everywhere. I just wanted to kind of start from some of the questions I had from that last discussion. And one of them was about, what you were saying about entanglement. And just so I make sure that I really understand what you were saying, it seems like you were basically saying that entanglement is proving that space-time is an illusion.
The way that we experience time is very illusionary. And so the space-time construct that we experience is an illusion, because at a more fundamental level, it's not how the universe is operating or how the universe is ordered. Because at a more fundamental level, there is no time. So our experience of a linear sequence of time with a unidirectional linear sequence of time is illusionary. But as Albert Einstein very geniusly, brilliantly said, time is an illusion, but a very persistent one.
Yes.
Yeah. So having the realization that time is an illusion does nothing to, well, not nothing, but it doesn't do a whole lot in stopping yourself from experiencing the linear unidirectional era of time. Although there are many of us who do have moments where we don't experience that. We kind of transcend that illusionary experience of time. But then also space, the idea of separation between objects is very illusionary.
Yes. Yeah.
For at a number of different levels, so at the most classical conventional level, it's just that our perception is limited by what we can see, and so what we can see is restricted to this tiny little narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, if you could see in frequencies or wavelengths outside of that tiny little band of the electromagnetic spectrum, the world would look very different. If you could see in radio waves, you would see space filled with energy, the radio frequency energy, the cosmic microwave background radiation, just an ever-present field of electromagnetic energy. Then going in the other direction to smaller wavelengths, higher energy, higher frequency, if you could get to a high enough frequency, especially approaching the Planck frequency, which is about the highest frequency for our particular domain, you would not see independent objects at all. It would be a sea of energy, of discrete Planck spherical units that comprise the Planck energy density. And so, when you're looking at an object in the room, that to your senses in that little narrow bandwidth of electromagnetic spectrum seems distant and separate and apart from you. If you could see at say the Planck scale resolution, you would see that there is no separation whatsoever, that there's a continuous substance connecting you and this separate object, and it's nearly seamless. There are some energetic boundary conditions and information surfaces that just have give some distinction between the two. Then if you go to the quantum level, you would also see that part of that Planck plasma fluid medium, that is the quantum vacuum, that is 0-point energy, is forming tubes, vortices, that are directly connecting you with the objects around you at the particle level. So the particles that comprise your body are connected via literal vortices to particles that comprise the material of other objects. Now, when we're able to quantify that and observe that kind of connection, like in a laboratory type setting, it's called quantum entanglement. But it's really that objects that might appear separate in the illusionary domain of the illusionary construct of space-time are not separate, because that's somewhat illusionary. If you go to a more fundamental level, they are connected. And so yes, so that gets into like the description of the space memory network, how information is encoded in voxels, so three-dimensional informational units, which is synonymous with the Planck spherical units. And so that fundamentally you have a timeless, eternal structure, let's just say system, and it has a very specific informational content, a very specific information connectivity pattern or network, and from that you get the holographic projection. So it's a hologram of a temporal domain, of a unidirectional linear sequence of time. But that's where you get a holographic universe, is that in a hologram, the information of an object is encoded on the surface of a 2D plate. It's not really 2D, there's thickness to it, but it's a flat plate that encodes via wave interference the information of a three-dimensional object, and when you shine light through it, it'll totally recreate that three-dimensional object from a two-dimensional encoding. So that's analogous to at a more fundamental level how our universe is arranged, in that you have a timeless, eternal, three-dimensional voxel interconnected spatial structure network, and so it's a lower dimension.
Spherical units like connect. You mean the Planck spherical units like overlaying each other and creating that triangulation? Is that what you're talking about?
Forming wave interference patterns, as well as with collective behavior, collective ordering behavior, like vortices, dual torus vortex structures that connect across the 3D space. In terms of like general relativity, you'd call those Einstein-Rosen bridges or wormholes. So a micro wormhole network. In terms of quantum mechanics, you would call it a entanglement structure. I call it the entanglement nexus. Because all things are connected or entangled at this level of that at that more fundamental level. So it's a lower dimensional encoding of information that holographically projects a higher dimensional construct that is 4D spacetime. But 4D spacetime is a holographic projection of a 3D information network.
Right. And you would call that 3D information network the mind of the universe, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
in our publication, the Unified Space Memory Network, we do describe, although somewhat provisionally, we do describe the mechanics and dynamics of how that 3D information network, which we also call, we give it the moniker space memory, because it's not time. It's a spatial arrangement, a geometric arrangement of information,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what produces time, space-time. It's space memory, more fundamentally. But we do describe the mechanics and dynamics of how that, in a sense, engenders sentience, because part of the information connectivity and exchanges occurring in that network are all what generate some of the primary elements of a mind. So, I think actually in my paper, Unified Physics and the Entanglement Nexus of Awareness, I delineate some 5 primary characteristics that comprise a mind and engender sentience. There again, somewhat provisionally, it's not meant to be the end all be all,
Right.
but it's kind of like a guide that if you can identify these 5 properties and in a system, that system is
A mind.
a mind. Yeah, it has mind-like characteristics. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm always coming from the Vedanta perspective, right? And that's that everything is all one, right? It's one mind, and it's basically fractalizing or fragmenting itself into these individuated forms of consciousness. Okay, and just like when you have a dream, your dream is like your dream self, you could say, is a fractal of you, right? Your dream self doesn't have all the information that you have, right? In some ways. But your dream is occurring in the mind, in your consciousness. And the individual forms of the dream and the space in the dream, it's all an illusion, really. It's one mind. So when you wake up in the dream, you realize that, wow, I'm in my own dream. I'm in my mind, right? And now when you wake up in the dream, you get access to all the information that the dreamer has. Okay. And I believe that that's what's happening here too. And so what I'm trying to do is prove it with the science. And, so entanglement, what everything you were talking about, the connectivity within that dream, let's say within the dream of space-time, it's describing what's happening when you're in the dream. We kind of talked about this before, right? So it's the physics or the laws that are occurring when you're in the dream. But then when you wake up and you realize what you can do, you become lucid in this space-time dream, you take your level of awareness as the container. Now you see that it's all an illusion, just like the dream was, right? And in that way, that what entanglement is really showing is that space is an illusion. Is that the way it's understood?
Within the science community, yeah.
Or is that the way you understand it?
Because I was just going to say, within the science community, there's still debate on, like,
I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem, is that, right? So that's why I said last time we spoke, like, I really feel like scientists that are studying consciousness and physics, they also would really benefit from having the science of Vedanta. But like we talked about before with the location of objects teaching, when I held up a pen and I said, where is this, right? When you understand that everything you see in front of you is actually you, then you see that it's an illusion,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was just curious, is that the way you guys understand it, as
Well,
the entanglement is showing that space is an illusion?
Yeah, I could speak for myself on that point. I'm not sure how other members of our science team might view that fact. That interesting way that quantum mechanics and general relativity is unified. So that's a unified physics description level of reality. Kind of the next level for science, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it is part of the scientific explanation of how space-time is illusionary, and how our experience, our quotidian experience of space and time, is to a certain degree erroneous. It's in error, because although it seems like this is how the world operates and works, and it seems very real and tangible to us, our senses in this regards were not engineered, did not evolve in such a way to actually give us details about the more fundamental reality of nature.
I don't think they were designed to. Because otherwise we couldn't have the experience we're having.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were, we evolved and were designed for a very specific experience within this construct. One of those experiences was not to have the type of sensual perceptions under normal circumstances. We can access extra perceptual experiences, but under normal circumstances, our senses aren't operating such that we can see
what's really here.
The deeper level of reality. But
I think that's changing as we shift, as we change our vibration, as we change our understanding of what this reality is. That then changes the senses and what the senses are able to interpret. That's what
we have. We and I believe we have the programs, so to speak, within us that can provide for that upgrade. Again, so to speak, talking like we're computer programs, but we kind of get. I'm using that kind of language very metaphorically. But
yes, I understand.
We understand it. Yeah,
but it actually it's so true, because that's what happened to me that night after I had that experience. I could feel energy that I couldn't feel before. Like I could feel people's heart, the vacuum energy of other people. Like I could feel when they would drop into meditation. I could feel this like. And I could feel the trees breathing, and I could feel the sidewalk. Everything felt like I was bouncing. I would tell my friends that I felt like I was on a boat dock. Like everything just felt like this all the time, the sidewalk, everything. So my senses, my ability to sense energy changed as a result of that. One thing that Bashar had said, he said, he said entanglement is proving that space is an illusion. And he said, hold on, let me find it. I wanted to read you this.
Because I can speak to that a little bit though on what is coming out of the scientific community. Advanced theoretical physicists are saying exactly that, that entanglement is showing that space is an illusion. So a good example of that is Mark van Ramsdonk, which is a physicist, I believe in the Netherlands. And he has a series of just really fascinating papers, research. And one of them is called Stitching Together Space-Time with Entanglement. one of the things that he shows analytically, via mathematical analysis, of what we know about the mathematical structure of reality of the universe, is that if you have these, just thinking in kind of an abstract mathematical space, if you have these configurations of information units, and you are having them connect in very specific ways, forming entanglement structures, an entanglement network. From that, mathematically, you can recreate all the properties of physics of space-time, in the sense that you can describe the Newtonian behavior of a material. When the force acts on it, it replies with an equal and opposite force, and has a directional vector in response to that force. And even Maxwell's electromagnetism and Einstein's relativity, you can describe all those physics of space-time from a deeper level description that doesn't have space-time at all. At a more fundamental level, it's just how information is connected, i.e. the entanglement networks that are present. And from that, you can derive an entire physics of space-time. Now, that's not exactly the approach we take, but if there was ever a scientific demonstration of how space-time is illusionary, that's a good one. That's got to be up there,
So he said, so Bashar, this is what he said. He said, Einstein was actually right. Quantum entanglement isn't proof that interactions between paired particles happen at a distance. It's proof that distance is an illusion. And then he said the time travel experiments that were done in Queensland, Australia. Have you heard of these? I haven't. I can send a link to you later if you want. He said the time travel experiments are actually an indication of quantum superposition, a particle existing in two locations simultaneously, and therefore that time is an illusion. All things exist here and now. He said if we really, he says when scientists really want to understand, or when they understand consciousness, they will have reduced it to one single point here and now.
Once again, Bashar's, from my assessment, from what I know about the science, 100% correct.
Yeah, he's 100% correct. Yeah. I mean, based on what I know from Vedanta, as well as what I know from what you guys are saying, but may not just you, but the physics community, as well as like people like Donald Hoffman. Do you know him? Yeah, Donald Hoffman and others. But everything he says is true, but the way some of the science is being interpreted is not necessarily what by some of the physicists is not what Bashar is saying, because I just think that they don't have that piece, right? They don't have that piece of like thinking that space-time isn't, or that space is an illusion, or having these more spiritual aspects to put a lens on the information. And I think when they do, and that's why I think science of consciousness, Vedanta, would be beneficial, because then that would help them interpret the data. Okay, so what I also thought was really interesting is, in part of Vedanta is, realizing that there's basically three different types of bodies. There's four. So it's the spirit or consciousness, and then the causal body, which is where all your conditioning is. And then in the causal body, so that would be, I think the causal body would be like space, kind of like space-time. Okay. Or when consciousness becomes self-aware, right? So as an individuated form of consciousness, then there's self and other, right? And then in there, that's where the vesica piscis is created.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where the womb of creation, or what I believe is equivalent to space-time, or not space-time, but the vacuum was created. So then the vacuum would be kind of like holding all the ideas, the causal body. And then within that vacuum, but within the vacuum is then where the universe, the individuated universe, is created.
Mm-hmm.
And so within there, the crystallization of your beliefs occurs, and that's what creates the physical body, as well as what creates space-time, the illusion of space-time. So basically, it's a stepping down process of like all this energy, right? This enormous amount of energy to crystallize into the physical body and the world, what seems like the world around us. And what I when I was watching the Nature Reality Workshop, I thought that like screening process was that.
Yeah, that
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Or it seems to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's using the same language and kind of thought construct there. Yeah. So I would see that as a very apt analogy.
Yeah.
If anything.
Yes.
So but even more so, it's maybe one and the same, describing the same process.
Yeah.
Because in the most recent solutions for how particles get the mass that it is observed, and really it's primarily the proton. The proton is the particle that comprises most of the observable mass of the universe. So that's really what we're talking about here. The neutron is a proton with an electron inside of it, so it's a flavor of proton. If we're talking about the mathematics, the physical mechanisms by which the proton gets its observed rest mass, and by which the fundamental forces of the universe are engendered, so gravity, electromagnetism, and then the confining forces, the residual strong force and the color force. Those are all emerging via this step down process. And so you're going from a very extremely high energy state, the Planck energy density. That's the native energy of the quantum vacuum. The 0-point energy density is 10 to the 113 joules per cubic meter, which is orders of magnitude more energy than the observable universe in a cubic meter of space.
54 orders? Is that what you said? Or
no. Let's see. It's I said many more orders of magnitude.
Okay, yeah. You don't have to be precise. It's okay.
Yeah, the exact number.
That's okay.
I think it's like 39 orders of magnitude.
39. Okay.
Larger than the observable universe. So, but that's a 1 with 39 zeros after it.
Right.
Which we don't have a word for that number.
Godzillion.
Yeah.
God trillion.
It's a large number. Yeah. But and so in that space you have unindividuated oneness. So there's a really good parallel with what is coming from the description more from a metaphysical perspective that you had described. And then as you get the screening process, you have a first screening, and that energy has a pretty significant step down, and the energy condition of the space then is a black hole.
It is then a black hole. Okay.
Yeah. That's with a very significant step down in energy, a very significant screening of the energy of the Planck energy density. You get a black hole condition. And that black hole, Yeah, so at the center you have the singularity, that Planck energy density, which it's kind of in the name. You know, the singularity is a singular point beyond space and time.
Hmm.
So you know,
Right.
all time coordinates, all space coordinates become singular,
Hmm.
oneness there. And then so when you're going out past that first screening into the black hole condition, you're getting the first manifestations of a spatial extent, differentiation in that sense. Still no time, because when you cross the event horizon into a black hole, um, your time-like vector that's normally there in space-time becomes space-like,
Hmm.
which is an interesting characteristic.
Do you have like an image of what you're just describing there?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you show someone how space is creating, or the vacuum is creating the black hole, and where, and then how does space time emerge from that?
You've probably seen this diagram, but you know this is when I'm discussing this. This is what I'm picturing. Uh, is this diagram right here, where so you have the uh, 0 point energy.
Hmm.
That's the
Yellowish color.
that's a Planck energy density, rho vac energy
Right.
density of the vacuum. Um, and then you have the first screening at the Compton wavelength of the proton here. So this is forming a surface horizon. And this is one of the first information structures that you have. So along this sphere, all along the horizon, you have very specific um, uh, uh, information encoding of the Planck spherical units, the fundamental voxel units, information units, energy units of the quantum vacuum.
Okay.
And because of that particular ordering, only a fraction of that energy is coming across this, what you could think of as like a semi-permeable membrane. And that's generating the black hole type condition. And that's at the charge radius of the proton. And so this is kind of like the singularity within the black hole, or
Okay.
mini black hole. And so this is the point where space and time no longer have meaning.
So this would be from the perspective of looking down at a black hole, right? And then
Mhm,
space-time is emerging from that,
mhm,
right? Is
mhm.
that correct? Okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the way, along this second screening horizon, here at the charge radius of the proton, you have another surface horizon, this sphere, and the way that information is being encoded on this surface, which is also the way that this surface is connecting via Einstein-Rosen bridges with other protons. This is a proton.
Okay.
This is the tunnel connecting it to the
That
surface
was loud.
horizon.
Okay.
The way that that's happening is forming the architecture of the entanglement network of space memory, and that's what engenders time, as well as other memory type functions that are foundational to the mind, to sentience in the universe, natural sentience in the universe. And it also is generating the energy condition that is another step down in energy. So a second step down, going from a black hole energy condition to a much, much lower energy condition where you're actually getting to if you observe the energy of that space, it looks like the rest mass energy of the proton, which is actually, from a quantum gravitational perspective, a very small mass energy. You know, one of the fundamental questions in quantum gravity is why is the proton mass so small? Because you know, the Planck mass for our Planck spherical units is 10 to the 5 grams, and you know, the proton rest mass is a tiny fraction of that, and that's called the hierarchy problem. Well, one of the reasons is that you have the screening, the step down, and you know, I'd imagine that even from like a, let's say, metaphysical type perspective, this is how our reality is constructed as well. That you know, there is an ultimate higher energy source, higher frequency, higher vibrational level, that it is more in the state of oneness and in seamless interconnection. And then after several step downs in energy and screening of that total energy information content, you get out to the periphery, where what you're dealing with is much more like mana illusion. Because you know, the rest mass energy of the proton is, you know, somewhat illusionary, but again, you know, not illusionary though in the sense that it's inconsequential,
right?
And you know, I think that's another point that Einstein was getting at, that time is an illusion, albeit a very persistent illusion. Is that saying that it's an illusion is not the same as saying that it's not inconsequential, right? You know, it's
and it's necessary. We need time in order to have an experience.
I mean, that's how we form a ego structure that enables us to have a individuated experience as a individual, right?
But I think there's even, you know, there's the ego structure, but then there's also knowing yourself beyond the ego structure, right? And so even that individuated form of, so even when I know myself as awareness, right, I'm still individuated from the one, right? So it's another fractal of the one. So it's the one, and when you're in the state of the one, you don't know yourself as an individuated form of, you have no self-awareness, basically. There's nothing, there's no other. There's no other form, that kind of dichotomy, that kind of dualism. So that's the piece that I think is kind of maybe not being used so much in physics too, is that, but
you know, a lot of people don't know themselves outside of the ego structure,
right? I know, that's my whole point. They don't. So, and that's but I think we're waking up to that, and I think that's, you know, that's going to take like 4 generations. You know, but you can already see the work on it, right? You can see that people are starting to work on their belief systems, right? And ultimately they'll get to the place where they can stand as awareness, just pure awareness. But that's what I think is one of the key things that are missing. And that's why I think some of the science is being interpreted incorrectly. They're not getting to the truth, because they're looking through the perspective of human consciousness or ego consciousness, right? And so when they learn, like, you know, what's fascinating too is when you drop your awareness down into the heart and feel the space around you, you basically move beyond the ego structure, which is really, really, really interesting to me too, because when I heard Nassim talk about the tetrahedral structure, the tetrahedral right? So kind of like the Star of David, I guess, the tetrahedral structure, right? That Star of David is basically looking down on that tetrahedral structure.
It's
right?
also called the star tetrahedron. Yeah.
Star tetrahedron, sorry.
Mhm.
So that is the human psyche,
Mhm.
right? And then when you drop your awareness into the heart, now you like, then the energy goes this way. It expands like the field, right? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So, and I can feel that when I drop my awareness into the heart, then I enter a different order of reality. I enter the vacuum, basically. I can still open my eyes and see the space-time, but my awareness now, who I know myself as, is the container, the field. And I feel that expansion, which does feel like scalar energy. And is scalar energy the energy of the vacuum?
Yeah. Oftentimes, when we're talking about field-like energy, a vacuum energy, so it's oftentimes referred to as a scalar field.
Scalar field. And how do you measure it? You can't measure it? Can you measure it?
The quantum vacuum energy?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can measure it. Yeah.
You can measure it. So I guess what I'm saying is like, so if I drop my awareness and I want to prove to people that that's what's happening, how do I do that?
Yeah, energetically. Well, I mean, there's the possibility that you could show it indirectly via certain physiological responses. I've thought about that, like with practices where like moving chi through the body. When I move and focus chi energy, bioenergy to a very specific location, it'll heat up in that region. I mean, there's more energy in that region, and early on I was thinking, well, if people are doubting that there is such a thing as chi energy and that you can move it through your body and that it has effects, physiological effects on your body, I could do this practice and put a thermometer against a region, and you would see an increase in temperature when the energy was there. Now in terms of though you're accessing, you're dropping, expanding it more into the vacuum energy state, how you would measure that, I'm not entirely sure what approach would be best to be able to quantify that,
right?
So that it could be proven,
right,
that it's happening.
Yeah, I have an instrument, much like you, just measuring the temperature by bringing I have an instrument called the BioWell. Do you know what that is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I have one of those, and I've focused on different areas of the chakra system, and you can see it expand. So that's interesting. But yeah, I was just trying to, if you can think of something later, maybe about how to measure the scalar field. Okay, so I did want to talk to you about like aging and health.
Okay, and just
how much time do you have?
I've got 30 minutes left before I've got a kind of a hard stop. I got to jump at 2:30.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I do want to talk about mitochondria and aging, or whatever you. So I guess what do you think is the most interesting thing to talk about? Like, what interests you the most based on what you know? What is exciting to you?
Yeah. Some of what we've been talking about is some of the most exciting and interesting things to me. I mean, the holofractal graphic information structure of the universe, and how space-time is somewhat illusionary. Because you've got this information network. From that, you can just understand so much, because you can understand the underlying information, infodynamic properties of reality, and that couples very synergistically with a science of consciousness. on a number of different levels, as well as like how you are feeding information into space-time and how that is then being fed back to you. So your feedback, feed forward dynamics on the information flow, and that's, you know, manifestation. So yeah, so much can be understood from that. But you know, I'm also I'd say very passionate about you know, mitochondria in terms of the energetic dynamics and information dynamics occurring there, as well as microtubules. You know, that's very pertinent.
Which are in the mitochondria too? The micro.
No.
They're not.
So microtubules are potentially a more ancient source than even the mitochondria. So the microtubules are in every cell.
Oh, okay.
Now, in the most conventional type description of them, they're the cytoskeleton.
Okay.
So the cell enabled to have a specific geometric form, or even for motility. So the ability to move intracellularly. So, you know, during mitosis, the daughter cells need to segregate and move the two sets of new sets of chromosomes, the two genomes. The genomes are ordered and separated via microtubules. But also as well for like the motility of a mobile cell, like a leukocyte, a white blood cell. These or even your skeletal muscle cells to contract. That's done via microtubules.
Okay.
And actin network. You know, this is actually though it's very, very interesting to me, because this is actually what brought me into biology. Because growing up, all I was interested in was astronomy, and so, you know, from a child up until I was in college, my primary interest was astronomy and a secondary interest in physics. But it was in my biology class 101 that I was like, so these cells move around. How do they move? They don't have muscles. You know, that's how we move around.
Right.
Right? It's a skeletal muscle system.
Yeah.
Cells don't have that. How are they moving around? And you know, that was one of the questions that brought me into the inner universe, right, of biology. And it's interesting. It's microtubules. Now, so one of the interesting things about microtubules is that they were involved in one of the first descriptions of quantum consciousness, as it's come to be known, which is just the approach within science that maybe we can understand consciousness, which we're not making very good inroads into understanding via the conventional model of the neurocomputational paradigm. Maybe we can understand it better if we looked at it in terms of the more phenomenal properties of quantum physics. Things like entanglement, non-local interactivity, high coherence, superposition, these kind of more phenomenal properties of quantum physics. Perhaps those are underlying consciousness. And one of the first, one of the most popular, and not necessarily one of the first, but one of the most popular and early approaches to quantum consciousness involved microtubules. So with that originated with Stuart Hameroff, which is an anesthesiologist and professor at Arizona State University. And as an anesthesiologist, he had a very privileged experience of seeing what happens when you go from being conscious and aware to not being conscious and aware, because he's applying anesthetic to patients, right? And one of the primary things that happens during that is that you lose your awareness of a conscious perception. You're probably still conscious and having an experience somewhere else, but you're not remembering it in your physical construct. Yeah. One of the things that he had noticed is that when anesthetics are applied, the microtubules freeze. They stop their dynamics. So if you're looking for, where's the cellular basis for consciousness, that's a good start. Because, what's the difference between non-anesthetized and anesthetized? These microtubules freezing was a good indication. And then he teamed up with the physicist Roger Penrose, who recently just received a Nobel Prize for his work with black holes. He probably deserves multiple Nobel Prizes, because
I think Nassim's going to get one too, right?
Oh, he should be next in line.
Yeah, he should be next in line.
We just need Roger Penrose to give him an endorsement. Because he joined Stuart Hameroff, and Roger Penrose had this theory of objective reduction of the wave function. So this is within quantum mechanics, and this is coming from within the orthodox Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. And within that, there's this idea that you have particles that fundamentally exist in a superposition that is described by a wave function, a probability distribution. Because they're in a superposition, the wave function gives a certain probability for where that they might be, and the probabilities can be equal for two different locations at the same time. That's the wave function. But you have this measurement problem, observer problem in the orthodox interpretation, where, well, at some point, particles quit behaving like they're in a superposition that's described by a wave function, and they seem to localize to a very specific location. And that's how we have the experience of at the macro scale that we do, where objects have very specific locations and they're not in superpositions. So within the orthodox Copenhagen interpretation, it's a problem. It's called a measurement problem, because it's just totally ill-defined on what constitutes a measurement, what constitutes an observer or observation.
Right.
Those are all kind of those three things are kind of all one and the same. It's totally undefined, and really, if you're taking an honest assessment about it, any subsystem can play the role of observer, can play the role of the measurement device. So basically, anytime there's an interaction, of a particle with another particle or material, that counts. That is a measurement, an observation, and that kind of goes to where science is showing that consciousness is everywhere, in all things. That all things are in consciousness, if you like.
I would say that.
But within the Copenhagen interpretation, that's not the case. And so it's kind of interesting that many people who are of a more spiritual perspective they like the Copenhagen interpretation, but it's specious. It's they shouldn't like it because although it's interpreted that, it's saying that consciousness is playing a role in the fundamental behavior of particles, because the collapse of the wave function occurs via observation by a human, But there's significant problems with that because it gives a very special status in all the universe to the human. Because are you saying that only humans have consciousness, have awareness that can collapse the wave function? I'm much more of the perspective that consciousness is not localized in the human. It's we're in consciousness, so giving a very special status to humans as the consciousness.
I did want to ask you about the many worlds theory of John Everett. Like I wondered how that compared to your space memory network. Because how so I want to talk about that, but I also wanted to talk about like us as being DNA. And I think that the DNA is like coding, could be like coding for, everything that we experience, everything that we're seeing. And also I wanted to talk about how the mitochondria are communicating or coupling with the field. So tell me which one's of most interest to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which one? It would be really fun to explore Everett's many worlds interpretation. And I guess that would be kind of in line with a lot of the discussion that we've been having because we've been talking about the space memory network and even just now collapse of the wave function. So that would
fit. That would fit. Okay.
Yeah, that would fit. Yeah.
So my question about it, so I don't really know it. Okay. So I'll just tell you that I don't really know it. But what my question is, because like what Bashar says is that, he uses the analogy of frames of film, right? So he says there's no motion in the physical world, right? There's no motion. It's just frames. Like there's no motion in the individual frames on a film strip, right? It's our light of our consciousness shining through the different frames. That's what's creating the illusion of motion. And so he uses that as an analogy, but the way I experience it is when I shift my perspective back to being the container, what I start to see is flickering. I start to see reality less material, less, the physical. It feels more vibratory. I can see the flickering. And so what it feels like to me is that like I'm moving through space-time, my physical body's moving through space-time, and whatever I'm understanding to believe as myself and the reality, it's crystallizing. Everything is here now. And what I'm actually observing is a result of how I feel and what I believe inside. And I believe that that's what basically, I don't know that John Everett was talking about the feeling part. Maybe he's talking about frequency, but I believe that many worlds theory of John Everett's is that like, it's all here in superposition. And then it's like collapsing based on, I don't know why he's saying what determines how it collapses. Is that your understanding of what his theory is saying?
You're on the right track with a lot of that. Definitely the part, the consideration that you don't really have movement in the universe in the way that we think things move. We think that an object is at position A, and to get to position B, it travels linearly, step by step through the space to get from A to B.
Yeah.
That's not how things actually move in the universe. It is because that is a temporal description. That's involving time. We already said that fundamentally there is no time. So in a timeless universe, an eternal universe, it is unchanging. So this gets into some very interesting implications, like around free will and the destiny and those kind of things. But in the timeless and eternal universe, it is unchanging. Basically, all that exists simultaneously, instantaneously, and so it is much more like the frames in a movie reel. Now, there is some kind of movement, at least in a sense, because something is shining the light through those through those still frames. In our case, that's a 3D voxel information network. Our consciousness is shining the light through that, to generate our space-time construct. But what is that exactly? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, is it our consciousness that is moving, right? Shining the light through those. So it's almost like
our focus,
and that all of space and time is a frozen construct of many parallel universes, many parallel worlds. And our consciousness is just on one of many journeys, going through a very specific pathway through that. And that's what's moving. And as it's moving through it, it's generating this story, a linear sequence of experience. But the many worlds, the multiple parallel universes, is vast and wide. So there's one particular path that we are associated with via our ego that is imprinted in this particular body, that is our memory. It's not the only one, though. There are others. Yeah, and because our consciousness is non-local and much larger than what we are aware of, it's having multiple parallel experiences, journeys through that eternal, unchanging information network. And so there's some scientific evidence for that. And Everett's many worlds interpretation is, I really actually prefer Everett Wheeler many worlds interpretation, but Everett's Everettian mechanics, or Everett's many worlds interpretation, is a little bit shorter than the Everett Wheeler many worlds interpretation.
Is it a pretty solid theory? Is it
it is the purest interpretation of quantum mechanics. So if you were to take the solutions of quantum mechanics, so there in the 1920s and 1930s, there were all these observational problems, and the physicists at the time were trying to reconcile their theory with the observations. That reconciliation that solved the problems, enabled them to explain them, even mathematically, with mathematical precision, gave birth to quantum mechanics. And that is characterized by things like the Schrodinger wave equation, Heisenberg matrix mechanics, which is actually similar, one and the same. The different approaches to the same thing. The Dirac equation, the Dirac relativistic equation, the de Broglie-Bohm wave equation of matter, the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. So all of those are resolutions, but the Copenhagen interpretation is, so we've got those solutions: the Schrodinger equation, the Dirac equation. What is the underlying physical mechanism behind those mathematics? And that's where interpretation comes into play. How do we describe how those things work? How the Schrodinger wave equation works? Well, the orthodox Copenhagen interpretation introduces elements into the quantum mechanical formalisms, the solutions that aren't there originally. One of the big ones that it introduces, and has, by many, and myself included, one of the biggest problems of what it includes in there that's not there natively, is collapse of the wave function, reduction of the wave function. In order to explain so it says the Schrodinger equation says that matter is in a superposition and exists everywhere all at once, in all states all at once. How do we reconcile that with the macroscopic world we observe, where objects have a very specific location in space and time? They ad hoc introduce the concept of collapse of the wave function via this ad hoc mechanism that superposition, the Schrodinger wave equation collapses and things behave classically, no longer quantum mechanically. That, though, is an added element that isn't there, as I said, natively. So if you just took so we're not going to, if you said, okay, we're not going to add anything to the solutions that worked to quantum mechanics, we're just going to go with what the mathematics and what the solutions say, you end up with the Everett's many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, because in that you don't have collapse of the wave function. You don't have reduction of the superposition. Everything is in a superposition all the time. Everything is entangled all the time. And all that happens is that the universe evolves and develops, and things become more and more entangled. The superposition produces more and more overlapping wave interference, constructive interference patterns. That's the many worlds interpretation.
Okay.
It's also the de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory. Those two are the same. There's one difference in that the de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory is trying to maintain that there is some kind of physical object associated with a particle that comprises matter and material systems. The Schrodinger wave equation doesn't say anything about there being a corpuscular object, a particle in that sense. Now the de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory is saying that it's there. And at the same time, you do have its properties of a superposition and entanglement, these non-local properties, these behaviors that are beyond space and time, normal limitations of general relativity, like the speed of light limitation, those kind of things. The Everett many worlds interpretation is the same description as the de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory, except that it doesn't maintain that there is a little corpuscle that is the particle. So that's one interesting aspect. But it's one of the reasons why I believe that the de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory is a good solution, a good ontological interpretation of quantum mechanics, because it does maintain that there is a corpuscular particle-like object. And, that's described by Nassim and Cyprian and Olivier. It's a boundary condition of the Planck plasma, a vortex condition with a specific boundary condition. So that's there. But you, at the same time, do have the many worlds as well, and it's totally compatible. But yeah, so quantum mechanics in its purest form describes many worlds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's good to know. Yeah. Okay. I know you have a hard stop, so I'll let you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much again. And if you do want to talk in the future about, I would love to talk about DNA and how the mitochondria are coupling to the field exactly. Yeah. But I know I've already taken a lot.
No, we'll definitely schedule a talk for that. It might be good to do it after I've got to do some of the mathematics with our physicist team.
Okay.
If you gave us a little while, I might be able to share even more about that, because that's actually one of our next steps. One of the next things we're going to be doing is describing exactly mathematically how you have energy coupling in the mitochondria with the quantum vacuum energy structure. So it's just, if we wait a little bit, I'll have more to say about it more precisely.
Thank you. Yeah. And I did want to ask you, I know you have said before there are people who've done studies about how fast the mitochondrial rotors are moving, but also that we can't that the food that we're eating couldn't possibly be fueling us. It's really the vacuum that's fueling us. Who did that work? Is that you guys?
Oh, well, I think that there has been some misinterpretation of exactly what was said on that front.
Okay.
You know, definitely the speed of the ATP synthase rotor has been directly measured in a number of different ways.
Okay.
And you know, depending on your ATP, adenosine triphosphate concentration within the mitochondrial compartment, and as well depending on your free proton concentration in the intermembrane space of the mitochondria. Depending on those factors, it can spin as fast as 60,000 revolutions per minute. So it has been measured to spin 1,000 revolutions per second.
Okay.
Very, very fast. I mean, a jet engine is 10,000 revolutions per minute. You know, so that's some serious spin mechanics. Now, in terms though of the accounting, does the amount of calories in totally account for the energy requirements of the cell in the mitochondria? I don't think that's been conclusively confirmed, conclusively evaluated, let's say. It's very difficult to make that kind of quantification. But I would say that we have very little doubt that there is coupling within that mitochondrial apparatus with the quantum vacuum energy for harnessing 0-point energy directly. So
and I know that you think that we'll probably unlock more proteins, right?
And more expanded capabilities for that.
That's exciting. And I'd love to talk more about that kind of stuff, because that's
we'll
really
talk about it again at a later time.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, William. I really appreciate it.
My
Okay.
pleasure.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.